Florida Medical Association, helping physicians practice medicine.
Welcome to the Medicine Curated podcast. I'm your host, Tim Stapleton, CEO of the Florida Medical Association. Our guest today is Dr. Amaryllis Sánchez Wohlever. She's a family physician, a certified physician coach, and an expert on the topic of physician wellness. She can be found at www.faithfulmd.com. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Sánchez.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim.
We're going to talk about how to prevent physician burnout, which is an important issue. It was an important issue before the pandemic and has become, I think, an even bigger issue during the pandemic as physicians on the front lines struggle to take care of very sick patients, and physicians that are out in the community are also facing challenges with their practices due to the pandemic. But before we get into that topic, why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What made you decide to pursue a career in medicine, and who influenced you along the way?
Wonderful. So I grew up in Puerto Rico, and my island home is still very close to my heart. Most of my family is still there. But at the age of 18, I decided to come to the mainland to go to college. And so I went to Penn State, the main campus in State College. And then I got a bachelor's in microbiology and molecular and cell biology. And then I went to Penn State also at Hershey to pursue medical school. And it does still smell like chocolate when you drive in, so I recommend it highly. But after that, I came to Florida, and I've pretty much stayed here. And I trained as a family physician at Halifax Medical Center in Daytona Beach, where I was tremendously blessed to really find a family and an outstanding program what shows you truly how outstanding it is the fact that the stability over the years, many of the faculty that were there when I trained 20 some years ago are still there. And that's amazing. And then what made me pursue medicine? Well, I have two main childhood heroes. And the first one was my mother. My mother was Assistant Secretary of Labor for the island of Puerto Rico, and actually had been selected to be Secretary of Labor when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so she stepped down, and I did go home to be with her, and she died when I was 21. So she ended up dying shortly. I was there for about 9 months. But my mom was one of these people who are bigger than life. And although I lost her so many years ago, she continues to influence me in a significant way. And she believed in me. I think that was the main thing. She always thought I should be in a field that entailed caring for people. I think she saw the empathy and compassion that came from my second hero, who was Mother Teresa, and her selfless compassion, and especially her desire to help the needy and the lonely and the forgotten. Really took hold of my heart when I was very, very young, I think in middle school. And so between the belief in me from my parents and my hero, that eventually led me to medicine. And I've always been very proud that was my choice.
Yeah, well, medicine really is a calling. And in your case, that is obviously true. So, you have a fantastic story. But tell us a little bit about that journey that led you to doing what you're doing now, which is, you're an advocate for physicians, and you serve your colleagues as a certified physician coach and as an author and a public speaker. Tell us how you got to where you are now. What led you to pursuing this?
Well, ever since residency, I was chief resident. I was president of the Florida Association of Family Medicine Residents, which meant I was very involved with my academy, the Florida Academy of Family Physicians, from the very beginning. And so despite excellent training and a sense of vocation, right? I did start feeling the signs of burnout about 7 years into my career. I first started in the military and then joined a practice I loved with patients I loved and peers, colleagues I still who are still in my life and I loved. And despite all that, began to feel burned out. So my story begins really with that, when burnout wasn't even talked about. Physician wellness was not something that was talked about, certainly like in the last 5 years in particular, 5 to 7 years. And so eventually I ended up going through coaching. I was very disillusioned with what was happening in medicine, what I've seen in corporate medicine in particular, where profits are often placed above people, and all that led me to the electronic health records and the intrusions, insurance companies. We know it all, right? The things that make it harder for us to see patients, when what drew us to medicine is our desire to care for people well. And so the top predictor of physician burnout is our inability, whether real or perceived, to do an excellent job at what we do. I pretty much don't know a single doctor who went to medical school and went through all the hoops and took the long, tough road, right, to be mediocre. Yeah. I just don't know any. And so that's what happens. And I started to see that myself. And so when I went through coaching, it really transformed my life. And that's part of the story. But and then I chose to become a coach to do the same for my colleagues. But the other thing that happened is that I became a patient. Along the journey, I became a patient myself, and I developed what ended up taking my mom's life. And although it was caught on screening, and I'm doing fabulous, thank God, I still did go through a journey I would not have chosen. And I saw two things. I first experienced the power of empathy. And the fact that, when we are patients, as doctors, sometimes we forget that the gift of hope is part of healing, and our empathy is incredibly helpful to patients and very healing. But the other thing I experienced when I became a patient was the fact that I needed to fight. I needed to advocate for myself so strongly and so persistently, and still to be able to see a physician to care for me. After a lifetime given as a physician to my patients. And I just was in complete disbelief that that's the case. And indeed it is the case. And so we can talk about that. But then the third thing that happened is that I went on an advocacy trip to the Capitol. I was invited to become a part of the National Physicians Council for Healthcare Policy. And I was one of about 30 doctors who went to the Capitol to speak to legislators, to learn about advocacy and about the issues more deeply. And that trip, which was about 5 years ago, completely changed my life. I met colleagues that are inspiring, that care as deeply as I do for patients, that are committed to excellence, that inspire. And this gave me tremendous hope for the future of medicine, really. So that's some of what happened, and we can talk more.
No, and you've written a terrific book titled Recapturing the Joy in Medicine, and I'd highly recommend every physician get a copy of the book and read it, Recapturing the Joy in Medicine. And in that book, you talk about the struggles that physicians are facing in today's world, but you really strike a hopeful tone. In looking at the book, I really look at that as your love letter really to the medical profession. That's how it strikes me. What makes you so joyful about being a physician and hopeful about the future of the medical profession? Because there are a lot of people out there, that are really down on, doctors that are really down on the profession. One of the saddest things, I started working for physicians, 25 years ago, and I know a lot of physicians whose children went on to become doctors as well. And now I hear a lot of physicians saying that they would never recommend that their child, go into medicine. And that makes me very sad. I know that you feel very differently and you have a very hopeful attitude. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What makes you so optimistic about the future of medicine?
Sure. Well, you asked about what brings me joy. And, I think one thing I've really learned by working with many physicians over the years is the fact that the more you align who you are with what you do, the more that brings you to that sweet spot where you have a sense of meaning and purpose and joy in what you do, right? And so for doctors, I think that used to be easier. And so when I help, support physicians on that journey, I really emphasize that the need to align who we are with what we do. And so for me, what brings me joy in medicine is to to serve, but in a way that is excellent and that I can be compassionate, right? And if I can't do it that way, I just really don't want to do it. And so, so for me, I do have a sense of vocation, and doing medical missions, whether overseas or locally, is where I have found my sweet spot. And that's really still my favorite way to see patients. What gives me hope for the future of medicine is absolutely physicians. It is my colleagues. It is people like, Dr. Alma Littles from the FAFP and the FMA, Dr. Jason Goldman from the FMA, and so many others who care about people, who are compassionate, who are excellent, wise, effective advocates, and have just stepped out because they care. And that's what I saw in that trip to DC, is I saw people who are not, trained in advocacy or, trained to lobby, but have stepped out of our comfort zones and to do what we know our patients need. We need in order to continue to be the leaders of medicine, right? To continue to lead our profession, which is being taken over. I mean, basically my message in Recapturing Joy in Medicine is very simple. We need to take back medicine. We need to bring what we know is the central aspect of medicine, which is that patient-physician relationship between two people, right? Not the 20 intruders that have gotten in the way, including the electronic health record, building a physical wall too between us, right? We need to bring that patient-physician relationship back to the center. And what's happened is we've been shoved to the back of the room. And enough of that, really. The pandemic has shown how critical it is for us to lead. People, the likes of Dr. Fauci, who in my mind is a hero. I recently heard him referred to as a national treasure. And I think that's true. And so it is physicians who give me hope. And to the extent that we unite, regardless of our specialty, regardless of, if we bring our individual passions, boy, there is strength in numbers, and we can do it. We can bring change. But if we are not united, it's gonna continue to be tough.
Absolutely. Well, and coming back to the doctor-patient relationship and thinking about why you became a physician, is really key, and reminding people of that. You mentioned the pandemic, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the pandemic and how, in many ways, it's really exacerbated this whole crisis of physician burnout. It's had a tremendous impact on not just physician wellness, but people's well-being. You're hearing more and more about people suffering from mental illness brought on by the pandemic, and being shut off from their loved ones in many ways physically. And so, what do you tell physicians and really people that are on the front lines of the pandemic who are struggling? What's your message to those individuals, and particularly physicians who we know are making tremendous sacrifices during this time?
They really are. And for that reason, the first thing I say is thank you. And I really take time and really encourage them to receive that, right? Because we often don't. And it's so important to, again, that's one of those things that connects us to our purpose, is when we do receive the gratitude of the people who we serve. And so the first thing I say is thank you. My next message is that we have to be human first. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, it is that if we don't advocate for our own needs as human beings, seeing patients, doing something extremely difficult, even more now, if we don't advocate for our own needs, nobody will. And nothing showed that more than the crisis within the crisis, right? We already had a crisis of epidemic, then we had the global crisis of the pandemic, and then we had the crisis of the lack of protective personal equipment, PPE, from the very beginning. And that just was so symbolic to me of what's happening in medicine, that we are not supported in the ways we need. And if we don't advocate effectively for ourselves and for our teams, that's a real problem. But so I say, let's be human first, which means go back to the basics, right? We need enough sleep. I've talked to so many physicians throughout the pandemic, and the number one thing I continue to hear is I'm not sleeping well. And it is so crucial. So we talk about that: nutrition, exercise, our need to get outside, our need to, continue to feed our souls. is so critical. I like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You remember that, which is a triangle,
sure.
and at the very base, it shows two things. One is our physiological needs are the most basic thing we need. And then over that is safety. And for many doctors, that remains an issue. So very important messages. The other message is that we are all grieving, and we all need to make space for it, because grieving is actually a very good thing. It's what we have been given to help us adapt to the losses that we have all faced in varying degrees, right? Some of us have lost loved ones. Some of us have lost colleagues. Some of us, have had all the losses that have come and the changes that have come with the pandemic that we all know so well. And so I say, allow yourself time to grieve, but also, and not only in general, but at work, don't, just kind of take those breaks that we often don't, and we just go from room to room to room. It's really so critical. But also there is a national helpline that more than 600 psychiatrists at the national level have stepped up and volunteered to help physicians in particular throughout the pandemic. Incredibly inspiring. And there's an 800 number, which I'm happy to share to that national helpline. And it's pretty easy to find it on Google as well.
Yeah. One of the pandemic has really, affected so many people, but on a positive note, if there is anything, positive from this, is that the world has seen, firsthand the personal sacrifice, I would say, and the heroic, caring nature of physicians. And physicians don't like to be referred to as heroes. They're every physician that I talk to says, listen, this is what I do. This is who I am. And of course, during this time, we're going to step up, because that's who physicians are. So, being a physician is indeed a very noble profession. And so one of the positive things we're seeing is we're seeing more young people attracted to medicine. You mentioned Dr. Fauci earlier, and we're seeing an increase now in young people deciding to pursue medicine, and the media is calling it the Fauci effect. So getting back to the theme of hopefulness, perhaps this is one of those moments in time where a tragedy, the pandemic certainly is a tragedy, but maybe it can be a catalyst for positive change. What do you think about that?
Yes, I couldn't agree more, and it is so inspiring again to work with medical students. I happen to work with medical students on a weekly basis through an organization called FACS, where we teach an online elective through Georgetown University School of Medicine, and so I get to talk to medical students frequently. And I also have interviewed in recent years here students who are interested in medical school at one of our local medical schools. And students still say the same thing they've been saying all along. They go to medical school, they want to go to medical school to help people. Physicians are so heavily vetted even before they go to medical school, right? And they've already, these students have already been volunteering. They've been going above and beyond. They're at the top of their class. And regardless of this challenge, what they, the students I talked to at the beginning of the pandemic, they were taken off the wards. And now in many medical schools, they're starting to be allowed to see patients again, and they could not wait. I mean, they wanted to be right there. And so, yeah, it's extremely inspiring to see them. And I do think it's been a catalyst that we're seeing it. And the Fauci effect is a blessing to our profession for sure. I only hope that it also impacts physicians as it has. Physicians in practice, I do believe that, the value of our education and our choices we made to get the best education there is, to go the long road. I think people are, beginning to see the value of that again. And, in the era of Dr. Google, physicians like Dr. Fauci really have risen to show us it's important to really know your stuff and then have the courage to speak up regardless of the consequences, and just, talk about the science and why it's critical. It's truly critical. So this is an amazing time, and I do think it's been a catalyst and will continue to be.
Well, you mentioned value, and that's really the thing that physicians I hope, understand, and most do, the value that they bring. And I think now, hopefully the public is starting to appreciate that more. And that's that's a very important point. So you've served on the board. You mentioned the board of the Florida Academy of Family Physicians. You've taken leadership roles within that organization. You're a graduate of the FMA's Physician Leadership Academy, and you serve on the FMA's Committee on Physician Wellness. So, what's your message? And you talked about this a little bit, unity and so forth. But what's your message to physicians about the importance of being a member, not only of the Florida Medical Association, but their specialty society as well?
Yeah, I think that my message is do it, and I have certainly seen the difference it makes. I mean, for me, I belonged to my professional academy, the FAFP, since the very beginning. We were encouraged to do so. And then one day I've served on the board of the FAFP twice, two separate terms. And when one day we were at a board meeting and several members kept referring to the FMA as well. And I'm like, at some point I just stopped and I said, can you all raise your hands if you belong to the FMA also? And almost every hand went up in the room. And I thought, why have I not also joined, right? And so I did. And it's been tremendous because I have seen how the different societies, I mean, really their purposes are a little bit different, right? And so our professional academies serve a purpose for us, for me in particular as a family physician, but then the FMA brings together all the specialties, which is so wonderful and enriching to be able to speak to the specialists to whom we refer, right? And to develop relationships, but also meet other advocates who are as passionate as you are in areas that they are very strong at. And so you can all then collaborate and, you make each other better. I learned from them, they learned from me. And so what I have seen is synergy. I mean, what I have seen by belonging to both organizations is that you learn more, you meet more people, and then you have the advocacy piece, which to me, nothing has been more empowering than the opportunity to serve as Doctor of the Day in the legislature at the Capitol in Tallahassee. To get to meet legislators, to learn how to go and develop the confidence and the courage to go into their offices and sit down with them and talk to them and share what's important and the things that we feel need to change. And to do that with the support of our medical organizations. And so it's just been really life-changing for me to get involved at that level. And that too has brought incredible hope because suddenly you're not alone, right? Suddenly you're not alone fighting for the things your patients need and you need to be able to do the very difficult tasks that we have each day so that you can do it with compassion and with excellence and in the way we want. And that is an antidote to burnout. And so the FMA, the Physician Leadership Academy, my goodness, so equipping and so helpful to help us do that.
Thank you for sharing your story, how you became introduced to the FMA. And I think, most physicians do identify first and foremost with their specialty. And that's important. And what I always tell physicians, it's not, either or, either I join my specialty or I join the FMA. You have to join both because there really is synergy and there's collaboration. And the FMA really is the umbrella organization, if you will, for all the specialties to come together. And as physicians, you're specialists first, but you're physicians first, overall. And that's really what the FMA, I think, tries to do is bring everybody together and provide a single, powerful voice where every physician can feel like they're represented. And so, you've been, the FMA is very blessed to have you as a member, and you've been very generous by sharing your talents with the FMA. You're a regular contributor to FMA News. You write a column for us on physician wellness, and you provide insights that hopefully, I think, dovetail really nice with the FMA's mission statement, which is helping physicians practice medicine. Well, you can't practice medicine if you're feeling burned out. And so what you do in providing resources to our members really helps us fulfill our mission of helping physicians practice medicine. So tell us how physicians can get in touch with you if they want to know more about the work that you're doing in this area, and how can they access your professional services?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is to go to my website, which is www.faithfulmd.com. And that has some tabs with brief information about the services I provide. But some of the things I've been doing in the pandemic, which has been tremendous. I mean, I feel like it's such an honor what I'm able to do, that I have the trust of individual physicians who reach out to me. And I also do one-on-one coaching, which is mostly by phone. And I have doctors I'm working with from all over different states, and they're typically physician leaders, which is just amazing. But I also do group coaching virtually now. I've been doing it through the pandemic, and I've offered some book studies as well, which has been a lot of fun and very equipping, I think, for people. And what else? I speak all the time. My next talk will be on incivility in healthcare, strategies to de-escalate difficult encounters. And so that's been a very common presentation I've been giving, because it's so timely. And I speak to residency programs and medical schools and hospitals, and whoever reaches out. I also lead retreats based on some of my books. I've now published 4. So I am. My life took off in a completely different direction after I went through coaching and really regained a sense of energy, and the energy that you need to take the actions that are needed for you to start walking a different path once you've been burned out or burning out. So once I got writing, which is really how I process life and something I really enjoy, it helps me express my thoughts. Then that really completely changed my life. Once I started publishing books, I began to be invited to speak. And so, sometimes when you choose to take that step to get the help you need, to get the support you need, you begin a journey that you would have never envisioned. And that's what's happened to me. So I want to do that with my physician colleagues. I truly care about each one. I mean, this pandemic has been tough. I've heard a lot of stories, and to have the trust of my colleagues is a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. You're an inspiration to me personally, and I know that you're an inspiration to your colleagues, and thank you for everything you do for physicians.
Well, thank you all for your advocacy for us and for all you do for our patients and for us. And I do believe that this pandemic, my prayer is that this pandemic is the beginning of the transformation that is needed, not only for each of us as individuals, to kind of think in different ways and to prioritize maybe better, and to make sure that we are human first, that we don't put ourselves last, that we are able to serve from fullness, right? Not from emptiness. And and I do believe that the pandemic has been a catalyst, and that the best is yet to come.
Well, that's a great message. Thank you. Thank you.
Florida Medical Association, helping physicians practice medicine.